In a calm sea, what appeared to be just a routine malfunction quickly turned into a shocking revelation. The night of December 21st marked a turning point, as Swedish authorities seized a ship drifting near their coast. Their operation was planned with precision and legal clarity, based on strong suspicions of arms law violations. But what they uncovered would shake the foundation of regional security. Unlike typical maritime mishaps, this incident exposed undeniable proof of a complex logistics web supporting Russia's covert operations. The ship, owned by a company blacklisted by both the United States and the European Union, was no ordinary cargo vessel. Western intelligence linked its payload to arms shipments from North Korea, fueling the artillery batteries fighting in Ukraine. The precise destination remained hidden, but the shadowy nature of such operations was clear. This was just the surface. Swedish officials, acting swiftly, boarded the vessel under special permission. The ship's crew was detained, prevented from sailing further without law enforcement approval, a stark display of sovereignty rarely seen in the Baltic. Inside, instead of a broken engine, they discovered the true secret, evidence of a hidden military network operating under civilian guise. The cargo wasn't merely supplies, it was part of a larger, darker scheme. These ships, once considered rusty tankers, had morphed into armed military assets. Swedish Navy Chief Marko Petkovic confirmed that personnel in military uniforms, armed with weapons, were hiding among the crew. This wasn't a simple shipping operation, this was a mobile military base, crossing borders unseen. How deep did this shadow network run? And what was its real purpose? The shadows extended into the depths of the Baltic, where unseen threats lurk just beneath the surface. Every detail pointed to a carefully woven trap, a network challenging the very notion of maritime safety. But the confrontation was only beginning. The seizure of the Adler wasn't just about one ship, it was a warning. Behind the calm surface, a fierce game of geopolitical chess was unfolding. The docked vessel was a ticking time bomb in a region on the brink of upheaval. And as the Coast Guard took control, questions loomed: how much more is hidden in these shadow seas? The fleet, once seen as rusty oil carriers gliding silently through the Baltic, has transformed into a formidable military force. According to Swedish Navy Operations Chief Marko Petkovic, these ships no longer just carry fuel, they now host armed personnel dressed in military uniforms. But who exactly are these covert fighters? Are they mercenaries? Active soldiers? Their true purpose remains hidden beneath the surface. As investigators from Denmark and Swedish intelligence reveal, these armed groups often pose as private security firms. In truth, they could be elite Russian soldiers or even covert mercenaries linked to private military companies. Such formations blur the line between civilian trade and warfare, stripping these vessels of their peaceful facade. Once part of a fleet of over 1,000 ships, these vessels now serve multiple roles, monitoring NATO activities, inspecting undersea cables, and even acting as mobile military bases capable of launching drone strikes. It's a floating arsenal, unseen, silent, and lethal. These so-called zombie ships are uninsured, poorly maintained, and outside any international regulations. Their systematic decay isn't accidental. It's a calculated move by Russia to bypass Western maritime laws with a black market network that cost nearly $10 billion to establish. Swedish forces recently targeted one of these decayed giants, the Adler. Its engine failure wasn't mere bad luck. It was a symptom of systemic rot, a deliberate weakening of Russia's maritime backbone. Sweden's bold move pulled out this dangerous piece from Moscow's labyrinth of deception. But rather than just a matter of ship control, this confrontation hints at a darker, more dangerous game beneath the waves. The Swedish Navy is locked in a relentless game of hide and seek with Russian submarines stalking deep beneath the Baltic surface. Swedish officials now report detecting these submersibles almost weekly, an alarming spike since the Cold War days. These stealthy giants, new Kilo-class submarines, are being produced non-stop at shipyards in St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad. But why? Every new sub improves Russia's ability to threaten NATO's supply lines, spy on Allied exercises, and potentially target underwater infrastructure like cables and pipelines. For the first time since the Cold War, the Baltic has become a battleground of silent warfare, unknowing civilians unaware of the deadly silent war beneath their feet. As the Russian fleet is modernized, the threat escalates, and NATO's response grows bolder. But the most shocking question remains, is this just the tip of the iceberg? Could Russia's underwater arsenal soon threaten more than just military installations? As Swedish forces tighten their grip on strategic points like Gotland, their unsinkable island fortress, one question haunts everyone: how much longer can this delicate underwater chess match last before the next deadly strike occurs? Recent reports reveal that the Swedish Navy now detects Russian submarines almost weekly. This alarming frequency signals activity levels unseen since the Cold War. Russia's Baltic fleet is rapidly transforming with the continuous addition of Kilo-class submarines, built at shipyards in St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad. Their goal? To threaten vital NATO supply routes and attack underwater infrastructure like cables and pipelines. Imagine the tense underwater silence, a mysterious, shadowy world where these submarines lurk. It's a game of cat and mouse, with every ping and sonar blast revealing Russia's relentless pursuit of control. Experts warn that if Ukraine's conflict cools, Russia's focus will shift fiercely toward the Baltic, drastically increasing submarine activity. The stakes are escalating. But Sweden refuses to simply watch. Through massive NATO exercises like Playbook Merlin 25, they're deploying a sophisticated network of sensors across the Baltic Sea. Germany, France, and the US are working together to hunt these elusive vessels. At the heart of this underwater battlefield lies Gotland Island, a strategic linchpin. This tiny island, just 300 kilometers from Kaliningrad, isn't a tourist destination anymore. It's an unmoving, indestructible aircraft carrier in the middle of the Baltic. From Gotland, NATO forces monitor every vessel, every aircraft, controlling the entire sea region. Holding this territory is crucial. It's the key to rapid reinforcement during any Russian aggression against Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania. Sweden has armored this vital point with advanced missile systems and air defenses. As the chief of Swedish Joint Operations explains, deploying missile units here can secure nearly all of the Baltic. For Russia, that's a nightmare scenario. Their shadow fleet, once able to hide in the dark, now faces a clear, deadly target, the radar-guided eyes of NATO. The era of covert, free passage for shadow ships like Adler has ended. Now, every Russian vessel is under strict surveillance. Large-scale NATO drills on Gotland underscore a new reality. The silent depths echo with the threat, and the fight for dominance in the Baltic is more intense than ever. In the previous section, the Arctic 7 nations, United States, Canada, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Iceland, unite fiercely against Russia, with Finland boosting defense spending by 75% and Sweden launching its biggest military buildup since the Cold War, escalating by 88%. Imagine the chill of icy winds slicing through the air like invisible blades. How does China, that colossal power from the east, suddenly swoop in to reshape Russia's desperate gamble, turning a potential ally into a cunning opportunist who exploits every weakness? These brave nations now challenge Russia's arrogant grip on the North Pole, teaming up to build mighty icebreaker ships under the Ice Pact initiative. Feel the raw power of their resolve, the rumble of engines vibrating through the frozen sea, the salty spray biting against exposed skin. Is Russia's so-called backyard crumbling, leaving their icy domain exposed and vulnerable? Witness the shocking shift. No more unchallenged Russian claims. The era of dominance evaporates like melting glaciers. As tensions sharpen, the United States Army fortifies its hold on the Pacific Gateway, unleashing HIMARS batteries onto Shemia Island in Alaska. Hear the metallic clang of deployment, the earthy scent of soil disturbed by heavy machinery. Finland and Sweden seal the Baltic Gateway, their actions echoing like a thunderous symphony of defiance. Sweden's bold Adler operation might appear a mere skirmish amidst this grand encirclement. Yet, beneath the surface, it signals a relentless zero-tolerance stance on NATO's northern flank. Picture the storm clouds gathering, a palpable tension in the air, thick with the promise of confrontation. Will Russia's shadow fleet, laden with precious oil, navigate only through tempests or mechanical betrayals, or crash headlong into NATO's impenetrable legal and military fortress? In this perilous game, who rushes to rescue Russia from the abyss? Consider China stepping into the fray, not as a mere ally, but as a strategic predator eyeing the North Sea and Arctic expanse. Sense the cold calculation in the air, a metallic tang mingling with the sharp bite of ambition. Is Beijing's interest just polite diplomacy, or a ruthless survival tactic that makes Russia's fading routes its own lifeline? With Sweden and Finland cementing NATO ties, the Baltic transforms into a NATO stronghold, posing threats to both Russia and China's vital trade pathways. Envision the electric hum of heightened stakes, the adrenaline-fueled pulse of geopolitical chess. Chinese President Xi Jinping perceives it acutely, Russia's western doors barred, keys clutched by Washington and Brussels. Locking Russia's shadow fleet and northern routes open evolves from Moscow's burden into Beijing's national survival mandate. But China doesn't extend aid out of sentimental loyalty to salvage Putin from his self-dug pit. Feel the opportunistic thrill coursing through the air, a whisper of calculated greed amid the freeze. No, this crisis beckons as a golden chance to cement China's Arctic foothold, claiming legitimacy as a near-Arctic power hungry for energy and trade dominance. The icy Silk Road project looms, promising control over northern arteries. Will China's grasp tighten, humiliating Russia's pride and bending Moscow to Beijing's economic iron will? As Putin's shadow fleet drifts into uncertainty, can he avert falling under the East's overshadowing hegemony, or is this the twist where an ally becomes the ultimate adversary? The Baltic blockade forces the Kremlin to kneel to China's insatiable demands, painting a catastrophic strategic deadlock. Imagine the bitter taste of forced concessions, the weight of humiliation pressing down like an avalanche. In fleeing west, might Putin tumble into the East's web of economic and logistical supremacy? And as the narrative unfolds, continuing from the last episode, where Russia's Baltic troubles exposed weaknesses in its shadow fleet, Beijing suddenly emerges not as a mere observer but as a potential opportunist, eyeing the Arctic's vast resources through its Silk Road vision, positioning itself as a near-Arctic power hungry for control over icy trade lanes. Imagine the shock. What if Russia's desperate pivot east is trapping the Kremlin in a web spun by its so-called ally, China? The creaking decks of Russian vessels now echo with the hum of foreign technology, turbocharged engines whispering secrets across frigid seas, the acrid scent of diesel blending with the salty bite of Arctic air. Feel the cold metal railing under your palms, slick with frost, as patrolling ships cut through the Bering Sea's choppy waves, their Chinese crews mapping uncharted depths. Russia's Baltic quagmire is dragging Moscow into China's orbit, a strategic abyss where preserving sovereignty risks surrendering northern shores to Beijing's firms and icebreakers. Picture the tension, allied navies gliding side by side in the Arctic steppes, their wakes leaving icy trails, spotlights piercing the darkness to unveil hidden worlds. Chinese Coast Guard ships, adorned with electronic eyes, dance alongside Russian counterparts, not just watching fishermen, but etching seabed maps, probing NATO's submerged sensors with invisible fingers, collecting whispers of future strikes against the alliance. And yet, the Adler raid? Merely a spark in a larger inferno, a nuclear chessboard ignited by melting ice, new passages thawing like forbidden invitations. NATO's Arctic 7 coalition, encompassing the United States, Canada, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Iceland, rises as a fortress wall, spanning from the Bering Strait to the Norwegian Sea, designed to fracture this Sino-Russian bond, their united patrols a resounding clang against encroaching powers. Twist, beneath the surface, Russia's decaying armada, those so-called zombie ships, desecrated by negligence and uninsured risks, now throb with borrowed life from China's lethal gifts, modern radar suites humming with data, satellite links pulsing across the void, and drone tech buzzing overhead. But oh, the cost. Western analysts warn it's edging toward outright support, sharpening the tools that Moscow wields. Yet, irony stings, Russia's military sinews, once ironclad, slowly entwine with Chinese dependencies, a digital leash tightening groove by groove. Is this the silent crumble of Kremlin's independence? As NATO tightens in the Baltic, the North beckons with sirens, What untold shift will erupt next, blurring ally and adversary in the frozen expanse? The radar system on a Russian-commanded vessel powered by Chinese software raises troubling questions about who truly controls the ship. Could this be the beginning of the end for Russia's military independence? As NATO intensifies its presence along the Baltic, the Northern Sea route, Russia's only way out, has become a crucial corridor for Chinese shipping. If Sweden and Poland block the Baltic access point, oil shipments and Chinese goods will be forced to navigate the perilous Arctic, circumnavigating Russia entirely. This is where the stakes grow even higher. The United States has ramped up military readiness in Alaska, deploying long-range sensors that turn the stretches of the Bering Strait into a potential choke point. When Putin attempts to escape the Baltic trap by heading north, he's met with the formidable U.S. Navy and treacherous terrain. Meanwhile, China might be cleverly using Russia as a shield to advance its own strategic interests. Beijing's muted response to Sweden's seizure of the Adler ship signals a delicate balancing act, supporting Russia without severing ties with the Western world. But the delicate equilibrium is fragile. If the shadow fleet's collapse threatens China's access to cheap Russian energy, Beijing's stance could harden into open support for Moscow's adversaries. This risk extends beyond regional borders, threatening a broader escalation, potentially igniting a global trade war or flare-up of conflict. China's strategic presence in the Arctic isn't just about commerce, it symbolizes a profound shift in global power dynamics, where control of the North becomes pivotal. Russia, once a superpower, now finds itself a subordinate player caught between China's expanding ambitions and NATO's ever-tightening grip. Its resources are now exploited, its influence diminished. Every tightening of the Baltic trap leaves Moscow more vulnerable, pushing its leadership into the embrace of Beijing's influence, and turning Gotland into a strategic prison. Sweden's assertive militarization of this key island has effectively cornered the Kremlin, leaving Moscow with its only lifeline trembling at Beijing's mercy. As Putin's last hopes dwindle, the world witnesses a silent but relentless shift, where the great northern powers jockey for dominance, and Russia's future hangs in the balance. Will the shadowy alliances unravel the Kremlin's last vestiges of independence? Or will the cold Arctic winds carry even more turbulent secrets to come? A shocking truth is unfolding in the shadows of global power, a game so complex, so dangerous, that it threatens world stability itself. As Russia tries to defend its shrinking territory, it's unknowingly handing over control to China and NATO. The question is, will Moscow's last stand crumble, or will a hidden alliance change the entire world's future before our eyes? Stay tuned for the breathtaking twists ahead. The messianic ambitions of China and the relentless fortress of NATO are reshaping the Arctic and Baltic regions. Satellite images reveal that joint patrols between Chinese and Russian naval forces are becoming more frequent, stalking the icy depths near the Arctic. These vessels aren't just fishing or scouting, they are mapping, stealing secrets, and preparing for future confrontations. This coalition isn't just a partnership, it's a creeping threat that could alter the balance of power forever. Could this alliance be a prelude to the ultimate maritime siege? Having opened the curtain on this treacherous dance, the true danger emerges beneath the surface. Moscow's aging navy, once mighty, now falters in the icy waters, brimming with rust and decay. Meanwhile, China pushes forward with state-of-the-art radar, satellite links, and drones, arming Russia's fleets with reliance that borders on dependency. Imagine the sensory overload of Russian ships, old steel creaking, engines throbbing sluggishly, yet secretly upgraded with cutting-edge tech. How much longer can this fragile facade last? Could the collapse of Russian independence be silently unfolding right now? As the shadow fleet deteriorates, a new threat rises along the Northern Sea route, the Arctic's icy arteries. If the tiny countries of Nordic Europe close their Baltic gates, Russian energy and Chinese commerce must navigate treacherous northern waters. The U.S., observing from afar, fortifies Alaska's defenses, long-range sensors trained on the ice, turning the passage into a chokehold. Every move Putin makes toward escape is countered by this high-stakes chess game, American ships poised, Arctic terrain as harsh as steel blades. Is Moscow cornered in a frozen trap, with Beijing already weaving its web? Behind the scene, China's silent support for Russia hints at a grand strategy, using Moscow as a shield for its own ambitions. Yet, the true costs are mounting. The more China supplies Russia's military with radar, drones, and satellite tech, the more dependent Moscow becomes, its autonomy slipping away like melting ice. Could the Kremlin's power be slipping quietly into Beijing's grip? Every weapon, every piece of tech traded forward tightens this dangerous alliance, yet, at what expense? Are we witnessing the soft collapse of Russia's sovereignty, hidden beneath layers of geopolitical deception? The real game now extends beyond ships and soldiers. It's about the future of entire continents, how borders will be drawn, whose influence will dominate the north, and whether the Baltic and Arctic will become arenas for global conflict. Russia's attempt to stop NATO's advance is backfiring, its own backyard eroding day by day. Moscow's last hope, its sovereignty, is slipping away amid a complex web of alliances that favor China and weaken its grasp on power. The question is, in this perilous game of strategy and betrayal, who truly controls the outcome? And what dark surprises are lurking just beneath the icy surface, ready to reshape the world forever? In the shadow of Gotland's fortified shores, the illusion of Russia's untouchable gray zones has crumbled. Swedish radars and missiles now lock onto every lurking vessel like a predator's gaze. Joint drills with Polish forces scream a defiant "This is our sea." The Baltic, once a clandestine playground for shadow fleets, transforms into a battlefield where one misstep seals doom. Picture this shocking twist: are Vladimir Putin's ghostly armadas really just rusted relics, or ticking traps ready to explode in a war Ukraine can't contain? The Adler's seizure proves it. A lone engine sputter off Sweden's frigid coast ignited a geopolitical inferno. Swedish authorities boarded that hulking 126-meter beast in the dead of night, seizing not cargo, but sovereignty. The icy wind howled as boots thudded on weathered decks, smells of diesel and salt spray mingling with the metallic tang of enforced halts. Crews stood frozen, uniforms crisp against the biting chill, as chains of command snapped under prosecutorial edicts. This wasn't chance, it was Sweden's calculated strike at the Kremlin's hidden veins, exposed by a ship blacklisted for ferrying North Korean munitions to Ukrainian bloodbaths. Flashback: remember the crisp scent of Baltic brine in 2022? Scrubbing hulls under melancholy northern lights, as Putin's fleet bosses patted themselves on armored backs, dreaming of immunity in snowy Scandinavia. But tactile fantasies of rough steel and guttural engine roars faded. Now, whispers of failure echo through Moscow's halls. What if one boarded ship sparks a cascade that claims 1,000? Russia's shadow network. Beyond 1,100 unregistered hulks, morphed into hybrid monsters, mercenary guards in crisp fatigues, eyes scanning waves like watchful hawks, wielding weapons veiled as security. They're not oil haulers, they're drone-launching spies, cable watchers, submarine shadows. Danish probes and Swedish intel unearth this rot, uninsured ghosts, decaying engines begging for breakdowns. The Adler's failure? No fluke, systemic decay in a $10 billion gamble to dodge laws, leaving Kremlin's arteries bare in NATO's grasp. But Sweden's masterstroke doesn't end with seizures. It's a turn of the tables, humiliating the aggressor. Stockholm demands MQ-9 Reaper drones or cruise missiles spanning 2,000 kilometers, enough to pierce Russian depths, targeting factories humming with ominous machinery. As the crow flies, Moscow lies just 1,000 kilometers away. These arms flip the Baltic script, turning Scandinavia into a prowling threat. Defense Minister Paul Johnson's words hammer home the irony, a deterrent to finally muzzle Russia's roar. Already, 500-kilometer TIUARRUS missiles arm Gripen fighters, but this leap evolves Sweden into an offensive force, stripping Kremlin pride and placing it in the crosshairs. Can the North's icy embrace encircle and suffocate Putin's dominion? Enter the Arctic 7, icebreakers churning through frozen seas in a united front. Finland's defense leaps by 75%, Sweden's by a staggering 88% since Cold War echoes. Yet, a chilling question looms, with submarines proliferating in Baltic depths, and Gotland armed like an aircraft carrier. Is Russia's shadow era truly over? Or does a silent underwater maneuver hide the next explosive shock? The ocean's whispers groan under pressure, as alliances tighten like frost on steel. What dark depths will emerge next? Imagine a fleet of ghost ships slipping through the darkest waters, unseen, untouchable, ferrying deadly secrets. Could this be the hidden backbone of a clandestine war? What if these ships, presumed to be simple oil tankers, secretly carried weapons, soldiers, and intelligence? Prepare to uncover the chilling truth behind a shadow fleet that has haunted the Baltic for years, until one night changed everything. It all begins with an ordinary day turning into a nightmare for Russia's covert fleet. A massive cargo vessel, known as the Adler, suddenly stalls in the icy waters of the Baltic. Its engines, normally humming with life, fail without warning. The ship, a towering 126-meter structure shrouded in secrecy, begins drifting uncontrollably. To the outside world, it might seem like just another maritime mishap. But to Swedish authorities, this was an ominous sign that something much darker was underway. As the behemoth twisted in the water, the tension in Stockholm grew thick. Secret operations had just begun. The Adler was not just an ordinary vessel. It belonged to a company blacklisted by the West, suspected of smuggling ammunition from North Korea to Russia. This trade supply was fueling artillery fire in Ukraine, a vital link in Russia's shadow war effort. The ship's cargo, hidden under layers of deception, was scrutinized under a cold, relentless gaze of suspicion. Swedes moved swiftly. Customs, Coast Guard, and police officials launched a surprise operation at midnight. With special legal authority, they boarded the drifting giant. What they uncovered stunned everyone: evidence of a secret logistics network, solid proof that these so-called oil tankers had transformed into mobile military bases. But this was only the surface. The real story was deeper, much more terrifying. Investigations revealed that the so-called rusty tankers had become armed, guarded by soldiers in military uniforms. They were not just vessels carrying oil, they were floating arsenals, armed patrols, and surveillance stations. According to intel, these armed personnel could be mercenaries or even active Russian military operatives. This transformed the entire fleet, more than 1,000 ships, into a hybrid force, part civilian cargo, part military intervention. This hybrid fleet proved to be a ticking time bomb, uninsured, unmaintained, and falling apart at the edges. The Adler's engine failure? Not an accident. Systematic decay designed to cover tracks. Russia poured billions into creating this clandestine network, secretly bypassing Western maritime laws. Their goal? To operate freely in the Baltic, until that fateful night shattered the illusion of invincibility. Swedish authorities aren't just fighting surface battles. They've entered a dangerous underground war, dangerous submarine pursuits, elusive underwater surveillance, and strategic positioning. The Baltic Sea is now a giant chessboard, with Gotland Island serving as the king's fortress. Just 300 kilometers from Kaliningrad, this island has become the nerve center of NATO's defensive shield, armed with missiles and sensors, ready to strike at a moment's notice. When Sweden deployed advanced missile systems on Gotland, it was like laying a trap, one that Russia is only just beginning to understand. The recent seizure of the Adler was a wake-up call, proof that the era of shadow ships slipping unnoticed is ending. Every tiny disruption, engine failure, a missed signal, now risks a domino effect: ships seized, cargo exposed, shadow operations dismantled. But this is more than just a maritime tug-of-war, it's a strategic war of nerves and technology. Sweden isn't stopping there. It's ramping up its military firepower, ordering long-range cruise missiles capable of hitting targets deep inside Russia. With a range of 2,000 kilometers, these weapons threaten Moscow's very core. The distance? Less than the current 4-hour flight from the Swedish capital to Russia's interior command centers. This isn't mere deterrence, it's a game-changing move, shifting the power balance and forcing Russia into a corner. NATO's alliance in the Arctic is tightening. Finland is increasing its defenses by 75%, Sweden by a staggering 88%. They're building icebreakers, producing ships that can dominate icy waters, defying Russia's claims of Arctic dominance. The Arctic, once considered Russia's playground, now faces a united front of Western resolve. Could this be the beginning of the end for Russia's northern ambitions? Each new deployment, each new missile, each submarine detected is a reminder, the dream of operating freely in these waters has become a nightmare. The shadows are retreating, replaced by a clear, undeniable truth: the Baltic belongs to NATO's watchful eye. The game has changed forever. And the stakes? They've never been higher. Have you ever wondered what happens when an invisible fleet of ghost ships floats past the world's most vigilant spy networks? Imagine a secret armada, camouflaged in the icy waters of Scandinavia, slipping through the cracks of international law. This isn't just a story about rusty tankers, it's about a shadow game that could change the balance of power forever. Vladimir Putin's vast hidden fleet has been haunting the ocean's gray zones for years. These ships, barely more than rusted hulks, have kept their secrets from the world. Evading detection, dodging sanctions, they secretly funnel billions into the Kremlin's coffers. Putin believed these vessels were untouchable in frosty Scandinavian waters, using their oil-carrying vessels as floating military bases. Armed personnel and uniformed soldiers on board turned the fleet into something more dangerous: mobile command posts in disguise. But in the tranquil silence of dawn on December 20th, everything shattered. Out off Sweden's coast, the illusion of invincibility was suddenly broken by a single, startling event. The Swedish Navy and security forces stood their ground, they had enough of watching from the sidelines. They boarded a drifting Russian cargo ship. The world watched as silence turned into a roar. Russia's covert operations were exposed. The Baltic Sea's image as a safe trade corridor dissolved in an instant. It was no longer a neutral highway for the Kremlin's ships. Instead, it morphed into a deadly trap, where every misstep could lead to seizures and loss. How did Sweden pull off this daring strike? It all started with what seemed like a routine engine malfunction. The ship was called Adler, a colossal 126-meter-long vessel listed among the EU and US sanctions. As it crossed a vital northern strait, its engine suddenly failed. The massive metal giant started drifting aimlessly, heading toward the Swedish coast. It anchored near the Kullaberg Peninsula, just off Haganäs, a little village shrouded in icy mist. Under ordinary circumstances, this might have been seen as a typical maritime accident. But not for the Swedish authorities. They saw an opportunity, something far more sinister lurking beneath that malfunction. That night, Swedish customs, Coast Guard units, and police moved swiftly, on special orders. Their mission was precise: investigate the ship's cargo and stop the violation at its root. Suspicion was high. The ship, owned by a company under heavy restrictions, was suspected of transporting arms from North Korea to Russia. Its past was shadowy, its route suspicious. The cargo? Goods from distant lands, not just oil, flowing into a network deeply entangled with covert military support. The revelations were shocking. What made this event a turning point? It was what they uncovered on board. Swedish Navy investigations revealed that the Shadow Fleet wasn't just rusty tankers. These ships had been transformed into floating military assets. Armed agents, disguised as crew, appeared out of nowhere. They weren't ordinary sailors, they looked ready for combat. Information confirmed that these personnel might be foreign mercenaries or even active Russian military units, disguised to evade detection. The ships had become hybrid war tools, monitoring cables under the seabed, observing NATO drills, and even acting as mobile bases for drone launches. This fleet, some called them zombie ships, was unauthorized, uninsured, and outside any international oversight. Their decay was evident: rusted hulls, broken engines, and a systematic decline in maintenance. The Adler's engine failure was no accident, it was a symptom, a consequence of long-standing neglect. Russia had poured nearly $10 billion into this secret network. Their aim? Bypass Western law, keep the flow of arms and supplies hidden beneath the waves. But Sweden's bold move pulled this aging network apart. This raid on Adler was more than a maritime raid, it was a gamble to expose the very core of Russia's covert operations in the Baltic. Yet beneath the surface, a deeper chess game unfolds. In the murky depths, Swedish submarines now hunt covertly. Reports indicate that Russian subs are almost a weekly occurrence in the Baltic. Their goal: sabotage NATO's supply routes and tap into underwater infrastructure, cables and pipelines critical to Europe. The modern Russian Kilo-class submarines, built at shipyards in St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad, are silent predators. Their mission? Threaten NATO's vulnerable lines, disrupt underground communication, or strike at strategic targets. Swedish officials warn that if the Ukraine conflict cools, Russia will shift focus to the Baltic. The number of submarines will surge. From the shadows, they will become even more deadly. Sweden isn't just watching anymore. It's acting. Through massive joint exercises like Playbook Merlin 25, Swedish, German, French, and U.S. forces skyrocket their readiness. They're setting up advanced sensor grids around Gotland, the heart of NATO's Baltic operations. This island, just 300 kilometers from Kaliningrad, has become the new frontier, an unsinkable aircraft carrier controlling all Baltic traffic and airspace. Swedish missile systems like the RBS-15, combined with air defenses, choke the Russian Baltic fleet's freedom of movement. Swedish military leaders declare, deploying missile units on Gotland secures nearly the entire Baltic Sea. For Russia, this is a nightmare. Their shadow fleet no longer has free passage. Every ship, every rogue vessel is now a target. Sweden's aggressive stance goes beyond defense. It's part of a conscious, strategic shift. The armed forces are pushing for long-range missile capabilities, with plans for cruise missiles up to 2,000 kilometers, powerful enough to reach deep within Russia's infrastructure. Why is this alarming? Because between Stockholm and Moscow, the distance is only 1,000 kilometers. That means strategic strikes are now possible within Russia's heartland. This shifts the power dynamic entirely. Sweden's moves threaten Russia's long-held dominance in the Arctic and Baltic regions. Meanwhile, NATO's northern flank, dubbed the Arctic Seven, comprising the US, Canada, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Iceland, are building a united front. Finland is increasing military spending by 75%. Sweden is undertaking its biggest buildup since the Cold War, with an 88% rise in military capacity. Together, they're challenging Russia's claim over the Arctic's resources and strategic corridors. They're producing icebreaker ships, asserting control over the icy frontier, an unthinkable challenge to Russia's Arctic ambitions. The era when Russia viewed the Arctic as its own backyard is ending. The game is shifting, new alliances, new strategies reshaping the northern landscape. The question remains, how long can the shadows hide the truth before the ice fully cracks? In the shadowed depths of the world's oceans, Vladimir Putin's vast shadow fleet slinked through lawless gray zones like elusive phantoms. These clandestine vessels dodged sanctions for years, smuggling billions into Moscow's war chest, and dared even the frosty Scandinavian seas. Believing their oil-laden hulks invincible, Putin armed crews with soldiers in uniform, turning ships into mobile fortresses. But a shattering dawn on December 20th off Sweden's coast obliterated that mirage, exposing Russia's hidden game and sparking a fierce Baltic showdown where every mistake now costs a seized ship. Imagine the roar of engines cutting through icy Baltic winds. That's when Sweden, resolute, boarded the drifting Adler, flipping the script on Kremlin's undersea chessboard. The Adler's engine sputtered to life, or rather, to failure, twisting a routine glitch into global crisis. Could the ache of metal grinding against frozen waves signal the end of impunity? With the 126-meter behemoth anchoring near the Killeberg Peninsula, Sweden seized destiny. On December 21st, armed with prosecutorial might, customs, coast guard, and police stormed aboard under suspicion of arms law breaches. Crew trapped, ship impounded, they couldn't sail without approval. This bold decree echoed sovereignty, unheard in these once safe waves, and uncovered Russia's shadowy arsenal. But why raid so swiftly? What secrets hid beyond the faulty motors? Flashback to a childhood memory, feet sinking into damp sand by the sea, salt-laced air stinging eyes. Waves crashing like distant thunder as fathers whispered of old freedoms lost to unseen threats. That tactile chill returns now, as Swedish hands gripped rusted rails, unveiling Adler's cargo from third nations. This ship, owned by blacklisted Leasing LLC, fueled Ukraine's front, trafficking North Korean arms via St. Petersburg. Investigator fingers traced suspicious goods, igniting probes that revealed Russia's evolved fleet, no longer mere tankers, but hybrid war beasts. Rust-cloaked hulks now bore uniformed troops, armed mercenaries posing as security, or even Russian soldiers. These extras lurked, ready for action, stripping civilian guys and birthing over 1,100 potential threats. They spied undersea cables, shadowed NATO drills, launched drones from decks. Dimmerang ships, uninsured and neglected, ticking bombs in Baltic veins. Adler embodied this decay, its engine failure screamed neglect, a $10 billion gamble sacrificing safety for evasion. Sweden yanked this infected route, chaining ripples of seizure. Beneath surface fury raged a deeper storm. Sweden played cat-and-mouse with lurking Russian subs, spotting one weekly since Cold War vibes reignited. Modern Kilo-class subs berthed in St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad shadow pipelines and cables, poised for conflict. Post-Ukraine ceasefire, their numbers swell exponentially. Yet Sweden counters, draping Gotland with sensors via playbook Merlin 25 drills, allied with Germany, France, US eyes piercing depths. Gotland rises, an unyielding carrier 300 kilometers from Kaliningrad, commanding Baltic skies and waters. Shocked faces in Moscow as RBS-15 anti-ship missiles and defenses lock Russian fleets out. Eva Skigaslament exclaims, deploy on Gotland, secure the entire sea. Gray zone freedom for Adler like ghosts? Over. Now, radars and missiles zero in on every Russian hull, with Polish-Swedish exercises screaming this is our sea. Adler validated this preparedness, legal and sharp, crippling shadow ops. Single snares, like Adler's, cascade seizures, NATO claiming cargo. But Sweden pivots bold, abandoning mere defense. Aggressive doctrine looms, armed forces crave 2,000-kilometer cruise missiles to pulverize deep Russia. Stockholm to Moscow, 1,000 kilometers crow flies. Ergo, targets leap, factories, command hubs. Defense Minister Paul Johnson vows a balanced deterrent to Russian reach. Taurus missiles, 500-kilometer range, already arm Gripens. Yet 2,000 shifts Sweden offensive, endangering Russia's core, flipping predator to prey. Checkmate bonds to Arctic encirclement. Arctic 7, US, Canada, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Iceland, unite. Finland splurges defense 75%, Sweden ramps Cold War levels 88%. Icebreakers challenge North Pole dominance. How will Putin counter this Arctic tide, as ice cracks under foreign hulls seizing his backyard? What unseen storm brews when U.S. forces guard Pacific gates? As tension builds, a question hangs, can one ship hijack an empire sea? Listen for sirens wailing through mist, metal clanging in cold grips, tyranny's stench of rust-fueled fears. Will next dawn reveal surrender or chaos unleashed? Stand by, the abyss deepens.